This podcast is brought to you by The Secret Meditation. Learn to get in touch with the magical frequency, the frequency that will change your life now. Find The Secret Meditation at www.thesecretmeditation.com. Hey everybody, this is Mark J. Ryan, and welcome to Part 2B, or Not to Be. The menu is not the meal. Okay everybody, this is Part 2B of Episode 2. The map is not the territory. The menu is not the meal. So what you'll be listening to today is an episode that I did probably 8-9 years ago, and it's still very relevant to the subject matter. I took liberty in Part 2A of this to kind of go where I was at the time the other day, and then I went through and edited Part 2B, which was from 2005, 2006 I think it was, and listened to that, and really there wasn't much I took out of it. There was a little bit of a crossover between the first part and the second part, 2A and 2B, but very little. And so I just left it as it is and edited and cleaned it up a little bit. And that's what you're going to be listening to. So this is Episode 2B, or Not to Be. The menu is not the meal. Part 2A was the map is not the territory. Basically the same thing, but so total it's going to be about 2 hours and 40 minutes. This episode itself is about an hour and 20 minutes, like the last one, an hour and 20 minutes. I think you'll like it. And again, it's from quite a while ago, 2006. And I notice, and I'm going to work on my speeches, a lot of ands and ums as I'm all over the place. So this is a very nonlinear podcast. However, it will come through where you will get a linear understanding of the conscious mind, even though it's more made up for an unconscious listening with conscious checking in every so often. Enjoy the podcast. Send me your suggestions, comments, ideas. Love to hear them. Right now, let's get to be or not to be. The menu is not the meal. Enjoy. As I explained on the other show, I had, for an extended period of time, went and stayed with a friend of mine up in the mountains, far away from anybody and anything. And I was very nervous at first, very worried, because it was 6 miles of dirt road off of 20 miles of a 2-lane highway in the middle of nowhere. And at first I'm wondering, what if I get hungry in the middle of the night? There's no McDonald's or Wendy's or 7-Elevens that I can go to, convenience stores to get something. What if I get sick? What if there's a fire? The closest, fire station, which is volunteer, is 9 miles away by the time somebody got there on all the dirt road and everything. Anyways, after a period of time, after about 3 weeks, something happened to me. Something shifted and changed where I started to like where I was much better than what I was used to in the city. And after a month, I didn't want to leave there. I wanted to stay there. And I go and I revisit those places, and I revisit places and times where I can get away for enough of a period of time, because I remember that there is something different inside me. I don't necessarily remember what that is inside of me, what that feeling is. I think I know what it is. And yet, after 3 weeks, I know that I really didn't know what it was until I get the experience. I envy teachers in that respect, that they're able to, work so many months of the year, 9-10 months of the year, and take a couple months off, or to take a sabbatical and go write a book. They get it. They understand it. I think that we ought to program them in or allow for it. I think that obviously the business world and capitalism or socialism, whatever it is, has it set where you can't take that long of a period of time at one time or afford to do that, so you really can't find out if there's another part of you that's available out there.
And I know that exists because I've done it many, many times. That first time was a real surprise. It was a real eye-opener to me. And I keep that in memory and remember to do that at least once a year. This year I was so busy during that period of time, I'm probably going to have to plan another time in the fall to really get there. I started to get there, and yet I didn't. So what it is an opening of getting away from the stimulus and response that you normally have. You remove yourself from not only a lot of the stimulus that you have. I remove myself completely from the environment that I'm used to. Force myself to go into different environments. You never really know who you are until you begin to shift environments. You start to shift behaviors, you start to shift beliefs and attitudes, because you have to, because you're in a different realm. People that can go overseas and go on an extended vacation into a whole different class of people, a whole different class of languaging, cultural rules and values, and jump into that and immerse themselves in that for a month, 2 months, 3 months, 6 months, really get an idea of what I'm talking about. It takes you so far away from your normal stimulus and response that you have a contrast. You have something now to compare your normal way, quote, normal way of living to something completely different. And what you can begin to do is, when you have the two, you can contrast the two and say, divide out the way you are in one reality and divide out the way you are in another reality, and begin to find what's left over. Because what's left over is really who you are. You know who you are in the environment that you're in, and you may know who you are in a new environment. And if you continue to shift to different environments, or stay away for a long enough period of time, have duration come into the picture or intensity come into the picture, you can discover that you think you're one way and actually you respond another way. A lot of times people think they're going to be one way when they get up in front of a group of people, or they think they're going to be one way when they're around a woman, or they think they're going to be one way in war when they go to war, or when they fight somebody, and they find out that they're completely different. How many times have you planned to start a diet or do something Monday morning, and you had it and it was going to happen? Monday comes around and all kinds of distractions came and you didn't do it. So you think you're one way, and you base a lot of your belief systems on that internal map. Why am I talking about this? Because this is what we're getting into. The map is not the territory. The menu is not the meal. We've discussed it a little bit. We're going to get into it a little bit further today, because it is such a foundational piece in my belief system of what NLP is about, and discovering that about yourself. Because if you could begin to discover it about yourself, because so many years I could not get it about myself, and yet I could work with other people. And the appreciation of when I started getting it for myself then added to that much more compassion and passion towards what I was doing in working with other people, because I was now experiencing it inside of me. So you get the contrast, you get the differences between who you think you are, who you behave like you are, and who you really are. And you need to really triangulate between those three things: who you think you are, who you behave you are, who you behave like you are, who you really are as your behavior when you're put into a certain situation, like the Monday morning diet deal, and who you really are. And if you can begin to pull those things apart, you can get to the root of who you are, and that is ultimately where I'm going. Yes, I'm teaching you hypnosis. Yes, I'm teaching you NLP and in application to sex and relationships, and of course business, whatever comes up. And at the same time, what else am I teaching you? There's a deeper level. This is also has in relation to spirituality. It is to say, and there's no specific spirituality. I'm saying find out who you are. That's outside of that level of abstraction. When you start to divide those parts of you out, and you start to come up with something that isn't your environment, it isn't the town that you live in, it isn't the name that you have, it isn't the car that you drive, it isn't the place you go on vacations, or if you immerse yourself into another reality, let's say South America, or you go to Australia or Africa, and for a long period of time, that you isn't you also. There is a part of you that has the ability to change and how you change. That's going to be more into the NLP and the hypnosis stuff. That's process, how that happens. However, when you divide that out what's left over? What realm do you put that in? What category do you put that in? You put it more into a spiritual nature. And I say spiritual nature, universal nature. If more and more people begin to understand that universal nature, that spirit nature, they will begin to see the similarities that we all have. We're taught in this world to see the differences that we all have. What is different about everything? How that the intelligence tests are ranked on difference. You know, how you make difference of distinctions, not on how you make sameness of distinctions. And that's a lot of intelligence tests. So the people that can make distinctions and determine differences, they're the ones in our society that we really look to and say, wow, you know, these are the heads of it. We because of the intelligence tests and how they score in SAT tests or whatever, IQ tests, Mensa tests, to say that these are the people that we want to emulate and be like. We have to be able to be very good at sorting by difference. What's different about something? What's wrong about something? And it doesn't give us the sameness of distinctions. And what we need to do as a society, as a people, if we want to evolve in a certain sense as humanity, instead of staying the same or devolving, is to start to begin to find out what are the commonalities. And the only way you can do that is to shift and change yourself enough to look at distinctions within you, to observe others and watch how they do the same thing. How does somebody do one thing, say they're going to do another thing, and behave a completely different way? And you could start to see this from one human being to the next. We all do it in varying degrees. And then you can begin to apply it to yourself, or have somebody else help you apply it to yourself. And again, when you start to take that stuff out, what is left? What is the sameness of humanity? So where we talk about the map is not the territory. We have a map in our head that is built in, usually through society, through our parents, through work, through television, that helps us determine illusions in our head, the way we think things are as opposed to reality. We have a certain structure to that base of thinking. And a lot of times there is error in that way of thinking. Lots of error in that way of thinking, which we're going to get into in a little bit. I'm going to elaborate a little bit further on. I found a book recently that when I was out in California, I went to a used bookstore and found an incredible book. It was written in 1950 and then it was redone. Ken Keyes Jr., he's done some higher consciousness stuff. This is some of the original stuff that he was writing, and it has to do with based on a lot of Korbzinski's work from 1933, who wrote Science and Sanity, who really is a lot of the foundation of what's going on with neurosemantics, whether it's neurolinguistics, neurosemantics, NLP, neurolinguistic programming, all those things. A lot of it came out of Korbzinski's work about how we have certain ways of perceiving things in our mind based on our senses. We have a subjective experience, which is our internal experience, and we have an objective experience, which is something that we all can look at and agree about. If we all talked about, is that guy walking down the street, does he have a red shirt on? Yes, it's red. Some people say, well, it's kind of more maroon, but it's within the red spectrum. We can all agree it's within a certain frequency of red and get it down to exact. We have to call the manufacturer and say, what was the color you assigned to that? Say it's a fuchsia. Okay, well, it's fuchsia then. We all agree it's fuchsia, the manufacturer said. So there's an objective way we can look at it. NLP is the study of a subjective experience. That is the internal experience. There's nothing that we can really say of whether that's true for everybody. It's true for that person. Is it true for everybody? How do we make a map, an internal map of what we're doing inside of our head and prove it to everybody else? Well, language is the best way that we can do this. However, again, red, when I say that, if I said to you on the phone without actually seeing this guy has a red shirt. Well, some of you might see a red shirt that has some flowers on it. Some of you might see a red shirt. I've got a red shirt that's got a beach scene from Vero Beach, Florida. Other people might see a red that's more maroon. Somebody might see red, and then early in that morning they might have cut their finger, and then they were bleeding, and then all of a sudden they're off on another tangent. So everybody's internal map is going to be a lot different, because then you have to add feelings to it. Once you add feelings to it, once you add the visual to it, once you add the auditory to it, what's the chances it's even going to be close to what somebody else has experienced? How many people stand next to each other and see an accident, and again, 12 different people have 12 different versions. They're there at the same event, and they still have completely different versions. Add to that the feeling they were feeling when they woke up in the morning. Add to that the experiences they've had all their life, their belief systems, and it's not even going to get close. So what NLP does is use a level of processing that goes one level higher than content. It goes into structure, it goes into process, and we have to be able to determine what is content and what is process. And one of the ways we do that is by the saying, the map is not the territory, the menu is not the meal. And if we can begin to really get this into our being as a solid foundation of what NLP is about, to be able to make those distinctions and separate something that you probably had as a whole piece, and now let's start, like if you looked at an IBM building from the outside, you see one IBM building, and it may be beautiful, or a Sheraton hotel, it's beautiful. However, when you get inside the building, there's the initial front desk, there's the pool area, there's the restaurant area, there's the nightclub area, there's the room areas. Well, wait a minute, there's different types of rooms. You know, there's the penthouse on top, there's the economy rooms here, there's the middle rooms. So there is all different kinds of ways that we can chunk down and say, okay, that map to one person is a whole, and to another person it's made up of bits and pieces. And what we're going to do, and what we are doing and will continue to do throughout this series, is to break down these pieces for you, or break the holes down into pieces where you could start to make more distinctions about something that at first was, again, a whole. It was a whole building, and now we're going to take you inside and start to break it down. So the map is not the territory. This book by Ken Keyes Jr., it was originally, it's called Taming Your Mind Now, and that's the 1975 version of it. And let me get the name of the book from the beginning. How to Develop Your Thinking Ability by McGraw-Hill, New York City. It was copyrighted in 1950 by Kenneth Keyes and Roberta Reimer Keyes. And the version I have in my hand is 1975, so that's 31 years old at this point. However, this description of the map is not the territory and the menu is not the meal is one of the, it's superb. It's one of the best I've seen. So hopefully, like I said, the author is not going to mind. I'm not charging anything for this podcast, and I'm going to read a few pages of this book and then kind of elaborate or maybe put some other ideas out on the side about this. Let me read this through. It's on chapter number 1, Your Verbal Maps. What is straight thinking? What will it do for you? Straight thinking will tend to make your foresight as good as your hindsight. Clear thinking helps you predict the future. It enables you to make plans that will get you what you want out of life. Again, subjective experience. We think about that building, the IBM building. You're going to have a room in the IBM building, okay? If you don't have any idea what that structure is made of internally or what the rooms look like, you're taking a guess. You're taking a gander. You don't even know if you can afford a room at that place. I say the IBM building. I'm actually, in my mind's eye, I've got a Sheraton down in Mahwah, New Jersey, that's 26 stories, I think, high, silver building. And so there I am. I'm saying IBM building, and in my mind I'm seeing, again, something different. I'm saying one thing, and I'm actually seeing something. So for clarity, it is a building that is a silver glass building, dark silver glass building in Mahwah, New Jersey, not far from New York City. 22 to 26 stories high. I'm not exactly sure, so I can't give it to you. Beautiful building. You can see it for miles around. I've stayed there before. There's different levels of rooms in there. So if I know what that building looks like, if I go on the internet and I do a search and they actually have something that says rooms, what the rooms look like, now I've got a better idea and I can predict my future about what that room is going to look like. Other than that, I might have a predictability that this is going to be a brand new hotel. It may have just been refinished, and I'm going to get an economy room that's one of the old rooms that are 20 years old that hasn't been refinished yet. So my ability to predict is not going to be there. I would call ahead of time and say, what kind of room am I going to get? So now, again, I am getting deeper. I'm asking questions. I'm actually calling the hotel. I'm making finer and finer distinctions to find out, to be able to predict in the future, where a lot of times people will just say, I get these spam emails all the time. Okay, we've got $10 million that we have in a bank account in Nigeria, and the president of Nigeria's son-in-law has inherited this money. However, because of the politics in Nigeria, we can't do anything with the money. We've come across your email. We want your bank account number so we can transfer it there. We'll give you a small percentage. It's a scam. It's a scam. And on my other podcast, I'm going to go into it because I know somebody that actually got caught up in that scam. And I thought it was one way, and it went a whole lot deeper than I ever thought. And the way they did it and the way they do it is ingenious. You think, how can anybody get caught up in that? Let me tell you, this lady is not stupid, and she really got caught up in this thing, and how she got caught up in it is amazing. However, we think it's one way. All of a sudden, what if you get into the frame of mind, I won $10 million, I won $10 million, or I've got $10 million coming my way. Some of the other ones are lottos. They're lotteries and saying, okay, you've won this much money, we need your bank account to transfer it in there. So this guy's either going to transfer $10 million into my account and give me $1 million for doing it, or I've won a $10 million European lottery, super lottery somewhere. And we have an image in our mind of what that is, what we're going to do with the money, and we now are committed to that image in our mind. And we don't want to know that it's a scam. Some people don't want to know that it's a scam, and so they won't go and find finer distinctions to find out if it's not, if their mind is playing tricks on them, or somebody else is trying to play tricks on their mind. And they go with it. At that point, they'll do whatever. And as a predictor of their future, they see something bright and beautiful in their future. We do this with other people. We see somebody that's a man sees a beautiful woman and says, wow, that's it, and puts all these qualities on top of her, and doesn't even find out if this lady might have had a criminal record, if she's a gold digger, if she has 10 kids and her husband's taking care of them, and vice versa. Is the guy a wife beater? Was he accused of some other crime? Is he part of a organized crime? Is he on a witness protection program? All this stuff that you have no idea. However, you see this beautiful person in front of you, and it meets all the criteria that you have, and then you put all these other qualities on the person and don't check into it, and you think your future is predicted based on the looks of that person. You think your future is based on the $10 million that you've got coming in to your bank account. And there's something else. Reality has something else planned for you. So what I want to do with this podcast is not only teach you about NLP, to teach you to make distinctions between the illusions in your head and how you are going to kind of predict reality from your illusions, as opposed to predicting reality based on reality. And there's ways of doing that. So, okay. Clear thinking helps you predict the future. It enables you to make plans that will get you what you want out of life. What you want out of life, not what you don't want. So here you are. You think you want this person in your life. You think you want this $10 million coming to your bank account, and you base it on that, instead of finding out that I really want to keep my bank account. I really want to keep my credit, instead of somebody, finding out my bank account number and sucking out all the funds that I have and withdrawing all the funds that I have, or finding out this person that I've gotten involved with is just the absolute worst person I could have ever got involved with. So your predictability based on the whole, based on not knowing a lot of information, just looking at that building, let's say, as a whole, without going inside and finding out what's really inside that building. That predictability is going to get you a lot farther down the road and keeping you while you want. Yeah, you may be disappointed, but heck, take the small disappointment in the beginning as opposed to the massive disappointment you're going to get, and maybe loss of funds and who knows what else down the road. Suppose you are starting out on a weekend trip to your favorite lake. You get one of the latest road maps and pick the best looking route. When you are a little beyond Plankerville, you'll find the road repairs make your detour through 30 miles of the dirtiest dirt roads you've ever breathed. You feel hot, grimy, and the polished job on your car is shot. Remember, this is 1950, so they probably weren't thinking about air conditioning in their vehicle at this point. Some people may still not have it at this juncture in time, or need it, especially if they're in the higher latitudes. So then again, I'm traveling all over the United States, and I look at a map and I see a map and it's represented one way on the map, and then when I get into the territory, it's totally a different way. I've been on one road. I remember I was going to go over a mountain pass, and it was open in the summer, and it was mid-July, and I drove 17 or 20 miles, and then I started going up over the pass, and I hit not a glacier, it was a massive bank of snow. And it was close to a little campground, and I asked some of the people, I said, well, the road says this is open in the summertime. They're saying, yeah, but they had a massive snowfall, and there's no way you're going to get through that pass. So I had to backtrack 17 miles and then go all the way back around it. Now, it was nice to the point where I got to. However, the map did not reflect the actual territory. That road was not open in the summertime. Why did you get fouled up? The map on which you relied did not represent the territory adequately. Now, the word adequately and useful are very, very important here when we're talking about maps. Do you have an adequate map, adequate for what you want to do? And is it useful for what you want to do? And a lot of times our maps are beautiful and they're glorious and they have all these internal pictures and colors, and it's fantastic, the way the world should be, this utopic version of the world. And then when it hits reality, the difference between the two brings in all kinds of emotions that we're not happy with. So the map on which you relied did not represent the territory adequately. Last week it may have represented the territory quite well, but that does not help get the dust out of your ears now. Remember, this guy was on a dirt road. At the time you used it, your map lacked predictability. Whether you use maps, and this is another thing, when you start to get down into and using these NLP techniques, when you start to have more knowing about the eye patterns, knowing about language patterns, knowing about strategies, knowing about pacing, leading, knowing about making again distinctions and how to calibrate people, all these things, they're going to help you with predictability. You're going to be able to pick out information that you never would have had. If somebody's telling you one thing, and then you look at their eye movements, you listen to their languaging, you watch their body posture, you calibrate to their yes and their no, and you find out what this person is saying is completely different than what their body language is telling me. And you're in a deal to buy a house, and the guy's telling you, or the woman's telling you, this is a beautiful house, it's a great house, or it's a beautiful car, great car, and yet from your making distinctions, you're realizing their body language is saying, don't buy this house, don't buy this car, I'm lying to you, I'm not telling you the full truth. Or you can start to get down and make distinctions and find out what it is that the unconscious is trying to tell you. Why is it saying no when the person is saying yes verbally? And you start to go on a path, digging down that path to find out what is it that you really need to know. And it may be something the guy says, hey, the sewer, really there's a leak in the sewer and the yard's got to be dug up. No problem. My brother-in-law owns a construction company and he works with plumbing. I can get that done for a couple $100, where somebody else it might have cost him a couple $1,000. So in his map of reality, there's no way anybody's going to go for it, so he has to lie about it. In your map of reality, that's an easy fix. You don't know that until you make finer distinction, until you go farther down the road. Instead of just seeing this beautiful house, here it is overlooking the ocean, exactly what you wanted for a cheap price. What else is wrong with it? Is it really as cheap as you think it's going to be? And it may be even better. Whether you use maps that do not adequately represent the territory, maps have poor predictability. You will not get what you want. Bad maps will lead you to anything from minor annoyances to sudden death, depending on the nature of the situation. One of the best ways to understand the problem of straight thinking is to think in terms of maps. Throughout this book, we're going to use the term verbal map. So let's get acquainted with it right now. A verbal map is simply a map or a picture drawn with words. A reliable verbal map represents the territory adequately. A bad verbal map lies to you about the territory. For example, if I say mosquitoes breed in standing water, I have made a verbal map that represents the territory. If someone tells you female canaries sing, he has given you an incorrect map that will lead you if you rely on it. That will mislead you if you rely on it. Every time you open your mouth to let out words, you are making a verbal map. If you tell Junior George Washington was the first president of the United States, you are making a map of the territory that existed over a century ago. If Henry Brown says beginning next year I will definitely cut out smoking, he is making a verbal map of future territory. If he stops smoking, the map says it represents the actual territory. Otherwise, no. Now, here's another thing. Now, when people make these maps and they say, okay, I'm going to stop smoking, I'm going to lose weight, I'm going to learn this language, I'm going to learn to sing, I'm going to learn to dance or play the piano, and they don't do it. What you can do in NLP, one of the things is to find out how they represent that map, and then go back and compare it to a map by getting distinctions and using senses and using strategies and visual, auditory, kinesthetic, and strategies to go in and to find out how this person makes a map of his future and does it, or she does it in her future, and then compare the two maps and find out what's missing. And it may be something that she says to herself internally with the one that she does that she hasn't included in the map, or he hasn't included in the map, for when he says he's going to stop smoking and he doesn't do it. So your job as an NLP person is to make those distinctions, find out, subtract it out, what's missing, what's the common denominator, and there might be 5 or 10 different ones. So you might have had to add 1, 2, 3 of them, and then the third, by the time, you don't have to add all 5 or 10, but maybe 1 or 2, maybe 3, and all of a sudden, boom, it clicks in and the person starts responding. So what you want to do, and those are called drivers. What are some of the drivers that with one map where he says he's going to stop smoking, and then another map where he doesn't stop, where he does do it, and another one where he doesn't do it. Now you can also compare that between people, because similar to computers, if you put software from Microsoft into one computer and take it out and put it into another computer, it's pretty well going to work the same. The speed might be different based on the processor and some of the other things involved. However, with human beings, we have similar brain structure, similar neural pathways that are built in. And what you can do is find out from Jimmy or Janie how they stop smoking, and find out what if there's similar drivers between them, and then you model 50 other people and you find out there's 2 or 3 drivers, things that are really there that are stopping them from stopping smoking, and then you go talk to Joe and find out Joe hasn't included that. You include that piece in there and see if Joe begins to stop smoking. Maybe you kind of tweak it a little bit here and there. So you can not only model within the person's structure of something that they do and that they don't do and what makes that work, you can also integrate other people's models and find out the structure of what they do and then apply it towards yourself or towards that person to see if they then begin to make that shift. So there's a lot of different maps. There's a lot of different territory to go and to explore. And the more you do explore it, the more you're going to start to get an idea of what works, what is adequate, and what is useful. We'll talk again about adequate. If I'm making a map and I want to know how to get from New York to California, and I know the roads and the interstates, here's where the construction is, here's where I can go around it, and I ask somebody to make me a map, somebody that draws a straight line and says, okay, stay on 90 the whole way. When you get to Ohio, 80 and 90 are going to run together, but then once you get past Chicago, 80 and 90 split. Make sure you stay on 80. 80 will take you all the way to San Francisco. Stay on the highway. There is a little construction out in Utah, Salt Lake City. However, if you go around and go up through Provo, Utah, blah, 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 and draws it on a piece of paper, it'll get me to San Francisco. But then another guy, he draws a map and he gets it down to specific. This map is 1,000 pages long. It gets down to specific vegetation on the side of the road. It gets down to mile markers. It gets down to rocks and stones in the road, certain cracks and crevices that are on. That is not an adequate map. That is not a map. That has gone way, way too deep, a lot farther than I want, and somebody else draws a line and says, there's New York and here's California, and draws a straight line and says, that's how you get there. That's not an adequate map also. What's going to be useful? And do I need to go? If I say to the person, listen, can you also include the rest areas so I know where I can pull over? Can you also include where there's going to be grocery stores where I can pull over and get some fresh fruits and vegetables, or a McDonald's somewhere along the line? They include, that's an adequate map. Finding out specifically what do they want on that. Do they just want the road? Do they want some markers? Do they want some vista points? Hey, when you get to this part of Salt Lake City, pull over. There's a little rest area. You can walk up on this sidewalk that goes up and gives you a spectacular view. I'm not into the views. I want to get to California. Or, hey, thanks a lot. That's great. It's exactly what I'm looking to do. I'm bringing my video camera and my camera. So what's adequate? What is useful to you? Okay, where was I here? All right. Beginning next year, I will definitely cut out smoking. He is making a verbal map of future territory. If he stops smoking, the map, as the map says, it represents actual territory. Otherwise, no. When I say my big toe hurts, I am making a verbal map of some territory that I alone am able to survey. So subjective experience, which is NLP, there is some commonality that we can transfer between human beings. However, when it comes to the content, the actual content, his big toe, which part of his big toe, how does it hurt, how does it throb, where does he represent it inside of himself, only he alone is able to survey that. So with NLP, you have a common language where you can begin to survey his territory and his map to find out specifically and exactly, as best you can, where his toe hurts. And if you're a doctor, this is something that's very, very important. You better be able to find out if somebody has a pain in their stomach. Is it something that they're having? They're not taking enough fiber in their diet, or does somebody have colon cancer, or possibility of it? And you have to make finer and finer distinctions and do more and more tests to find out what the territory of my stomach aches means. So again, I am mapping territory within my own body. If I say I am very disappointed, I am again mapping territory within me, my feelings. A lot of what we do in NLP has to do with feelings. How we process information and the strategy of how that information is processed, and then it gets into feelings. What are the feelings associated? What are the emotions associated? And feelings are emotions. Now, a spiritual teacher of mine has taught me the distinction between feelings and emotions. If you rub your little finger with your thumb, you can feel pressure, you can feel movement, you may even feel something that tingles a little bit there. Those are feelings. If I sit there and say that makes me feel very comfortable, that is more of a state or an emotion that's going on. And feelings are something that's like pressure. It is a force. It could be heat. It could be cold. It could be liquid. It could, feeling like a liquid feeling. It could be a dry feeling. It could be smooth. Those are more feelings as opposed to emotions. I'm disappointed. I'm upset. I'm angry. That hurts. Well, it's actually pressure that goes to the point where your nervous system can't handle it and starts to create a verbal noise coming out of your mouth that says, stop it, that hurts. All the knowledge NLP has a lot to do with what are the strategies that bring you to the point of a feeling. And if you have a feeling and say, I'm feeling depressed and I want to stop it, what are the strategies that you do inside? What are the things that you do inside? The subjective maps that you have that get you to depression or feeling depressed. And then if we start to switch them or compare them to when you're not feeling depressed or when you're feeling good or when other people are feeling good, and you do the contrast, you start to again subtract out what's relevant, what's useful, what's adequate, and what's not, and then you start to find the commonalities, the sameness, where one person may not be using it, where let's say 10 people have used this strategy and now they no longer feel depressed, and this person hasn't integrated that strategy. If you implement that strategy or that software into that person as best as you can and have them begin to use that strategy, chances are they might pop out of it. I'm not going to say 100% because I'm not a doctor. I can't guarantee it. However, it's very useful. All the knowledge and memories we have filed away in our heads may be regarded as mental maps. All the thousands of words we shoot at each other every day may be regarded as verbal maps representing past, present, or future territory. The problem of straight thinking is, do my verbal maps adequately represent the territory? If they do, I can rely on them. I can predict from them. My plans will work. If my verbal maps do not represent the territory, trouble lurks ahead. Inadequate maps put us in hot water. Tim McCarthy was hit by a truck, and the first report of the doctor was discouraging. "I'm afraid your husband hasn't long to live," he told Tim's wife. "I'll come again tomorrow." The next day, the doctor's report was still gloomy, but then the doctor called a third time. The patient was rallying, and on the fourth day, he was out of danger. "Well, missus," said the doctor, "Tim is going to pull through all right." "She says, puts me in a bit of a hole, though," said the woman. "I've gone and sold all of his clothes for funeral expenses." Whether we act on maps that do not adequately represent the territory, it puts us in a bit of a hole. Whenever we act on maps that do not adequately represent the territory, it puts us in a bit of a hole. In everything we do, we need adequate verbal maps. If we make a mistake in our checking account and think the balance is $352 when it is only $241.50, some of our checks are going to bounce. The map in our checkbook must adequately represent the funds in our account if we are to avoid trouble. If the gas gauge in our car says half full when our tank is about empty, it does not map the territory very well. I've got a gas gauge in my car that does not work at all. I don't know what happened to it. It used to work fine. It's a year 2000 car. It's a good name brand, and the gas gauge does not work. However, I know that when it was working initially, I always check to see how many miles I get out of a tank full before I need to fill up, and I knew that I can really push it to about 450 miles if I'm on the highway. If I'm on the city, it's a whole different deal. But if I'm on the highway, I can get about 450 miles out of a tank full. So now that the thing's not working at all, every time I fill up, I hit the little odometer button, zero it back out again, and when I get around 400 miles, I know I've got 50 to 100 miles left in the tank safely, and what I'll do is fill up with gas right around the 400 mile mark. However, when I'm in the city, I know that I have played around with the mileage there, and that can be 10 miles. It gets around 30 miles to the gallon. It's a big car too, 6-cylinder, and I get almost 30 miles a gallon on the highway, and I'm only getting about 18 to 20 in the city. So if I still go by the map of, well, my tank will last 400 miles and I do it in the city, I'm going to be over the side of the road calling AAA because my gas gauge is not adequately representing the actual mileage that car does. So now I'm going to readjust it and I'm going to fill up every 250 to 300 miles. So again, is your map adequate? If the gas gauge in your car says half full when the tank is about empty, it does not map the territory very well. If we rely on it, our blood pressure is going up, especially if we want to get somewhere in a hurry. And isn't that the case usually? Here's a belief system that a lot of people have. Just when you don't want it to happen. Well, when is a good time that your car breaks down? When is a good time that you run out of gas? Well, I'll tell you what, mine broke down one time in my driveway. And I thank God for that, because if that thing had broke down on the street, whoo, boy, I'd have hated it. However, there's not really any good time. Don't buy that map. Some people find it profitable to mislead us with inaccurate verbal maps. A house hunter who has just got off the train, you can tell what age this book is, said to the boy near the station, "Son, I'm looking for Mr. Wilson's new block of semi-detached cottages. How far are they from here?" "About 20 minutes walk." 20 minutes, explained the house hunter. "Nonsense. The advertisement said only 5. "Well," drawled the boy, you can believe me or you can believe the ad, but I ain't trying to make a sale." I love that one. He's not trying to make a sale. He's telling them the truth. The disappointing sagas of quack medicines, miraculous toothpaste that clean your tooth by grinding off enamel, confidence and skin games, phony get-rich schemes, lost manhood cures. Well, I'll tell you, that's dated because we have Cialis and we have Viagra now, don't we? So lost manhood claims, we know that those claims now with medicine are pretty accurate, at least from the guys that I've heard talk about it that use it. that is not a snake oil salesman selling that product. That thing actually works, sometimes too good. Guy's taking a little bit too big of a dose, and 8 hours later he can't leave the house. Lost manhood cures, and the gasoline mileage car salesman claim all warn us that if we want to avoid disappointment, we must inquire closely into the reliability of the verbal maps people give us. Some men were gathered around the stove in a village store discussing the way farmer Silas Perkins was so economical with the truth. At the end of the discussion, his next-door neighbor spoke up. Well, maybe Si ain't such an awful liar, but around our way, when feeding time comes, he has to get someone else to call his hogs for him. He's so bad, when he calls the hogs for feeding time, the hogs won't even come. Just in case you didn't get that one, the hogs think he's a liar too. Even animals want maps that represent the territory. To enjoy the confidence of animals or human beings, we must make maps that jive with the actual territory. A liar is not believed even when he tells the truth, and the truth can be described simply as a verbal map that represents the territory. Use the term verbal map in your thinking. If we reflect upon our language, wrote Alfred Korzybski in his famous work Science and Sanity, we find that at best they must be considered only as maps. And this is reprinted by permission, copyright 1933, 41, 48 by Alfred Korzybski. We are going to cut through a lot of scholarly underbrush by describing straight thinking as simply making maps that adequately represent the territory. As you get into this book, you will see what a useful approach that is. Begin right now to use the idea of the verbal map in your thinking. Instead of saying, now Junior, tell the truth, say, now Junior, make your maps represent your territory. That may be a great thing to do with kids too. I haven't heard it ever put that way before. I really like that. Junior, make your maps represent your territory. You're giving them something to do. At the office, you can say to yourself something more specific than telling the truth, because how subjective is truth to each and every one of us? However, making your maps represent the territory more adequately. Now that's something Junior might get a lot better, and he may begin to tell the truth in your version of it, or in how we all view the truth. What would 12 jurors agree on is the truth? That may be a way to get Junior to do that much better, or Senior too. At the office, you can say to yourself, when I make that report to the boss on what our competitors are doing, my verbal maps must adequately represent the territory, otherwise we can't plan effectively. Excellent point in business. What are your projections? What are your maps? And how are you mapping things based on your competitors and your industry? And if your map is not accurate about your competitors or your industry in general, you could be way off track, and it could cause the business. Let's say cost the business. Period. At home, you might say the verbal map given me by the garbage men were lousy. He said he would be here Tuesday. Now it's Wednesday afternoon, and the can is so full the top won't go on. What we actually begin to think in terms of making adequate, when we begin to actually think in terms of making adequate verbal maps, it will be much easier for us to apply the principles set forth in this book. You will be surprised at how much the simple idea of verbal mapping can help you once you have used it enough to explore its possibilities. Why accurate maps may not be good enough. You may have wondered why so much emphasis has been put upon the word adequate. Useful is the word that I've also used. What is useful for you? What is useful for your company? What is useful for your family? I do like the adequate, so I'll use useful and adequate interchangeably, and yet if I need to get more specific on one, I will. However, right now, adequate, useful go hand in hand for me, and hopefully for you. The word adequate has been carefully chosen. A verbal map may be considered strictly accurate and yet for our purposes be inadequate and misleading. For example, Bob had fished all day without any luck. I love this one. This is great. Bob had fished all day without any luck. On his way home, he went to Captain Tom's fish market and said, Tom, pick out 5 of your biggest fish and toss them to me. You mean throw them? Yes. Just throw them over here to me one at a time so I can tell the family that I caught them. I may be a poor fisherman, but I'm not a liar. I love it. I love it. Some people might say the fisherman was making an accurate verbal map if he said he caught the fish, because when Tom threw him the fish, he caught the fish. But no one would insist it was an adequate. It might be accurate, but was it an adequate verbal map? We see readily that however accurate that map is, it is thoroughly misleading and has nothing to do with actual territory. However, that's how comedy works. That's exactly how comedy works. When it comes to important decisions, when it comes to getting along in this complex world of ours, we must have adequate verbal maps if we are to get what we want. Our happiness and our success depends almost entirely upon adequacy of the maps we make in our personal, social, and business affairs. Adequate maps are also what make up character. Character. A lot of what's going on in America is more about the idea of Tom catching the fish and being accurate. We think about Bill Clinton, what is, what the meaning of that is. That might be accurate in one context. Was it adequate? Was it adequate? No. And that's the idea of character. Character is to say, okay, I can make this thing accurate. However, based on my character, do I want to make it it was accurate, but do I want to make it adequate? Now, if somebody's feelings are going to get hurt, or somebody could end up getting harmed based on information, then it might be time to go to accurate information or even inaccurate information for the present time until cooler heads prevail. Again, though, your character, which is going to be very important, is going to consist of you making adequate maps. Now, NLP is twofold. It's like electricity. You can use it to power your toaster, or they can use it to electrocute somebody. Again, I heard that somebody chose, instead of lethal injection, they chose electrocution, and they're going to now use electricity to kill another human being in a state. So when you use these distinctions, you can use NLP to really, really mislead somebody in another direction, because if you know their way of processing and you know how their patterns work, you can take that information and give them the perfect information that will go through their strategies and their ways of interpreting information to get them to believe something that may be destructive to them. Again, it's how comedy works, and we laugh at it in a funny way. However, if the guy that's a salesman to you in a store, or a car salesman, or selling you a house does the same thing, it's not very nice, and it may be illegal, and it may cause damage to you and the other person, and it's really going to cause some damage to your character. So very, very important that when we do make adequate maps, we use NLP, we use this technology to find out how we can improve people's lives, how we can make things better, how we can make the maps fit the territory better. Here is an accurate verbal map of someone we all know about. Mr. A.H. Is an unhappy childhood with little formal education. His ambition to become an artist was bitterly opposed by his father. Although self-educated, he became an author of a book, the sales of which his country ranked next to the Bible. Wow. Obstacles did not discourage him. People would say, why you can't do that, but he hurdled one barrier after another. He placed a great deal of emphasis upon improving the health of young people, and he was known throughout the world as a dynamic speaker. His closest associates said of him, he accomplishes great deeds out of the greatness of his heart, the passion of his will, and the goodness of his soul. Sounds like a pretty good man, doesn't he? So far as I know, everything in the foregoing description of Adolf Hitler is accurate and verifiable. Notice how we can be woefully misled by an accurate map. Only an adequate, well-rounded, balanced map deserves our trust. An adequate map is accurate, but an accurate map is not necessarily adequate. We must avoid mistaking one for another. I recently was at a seminar where there was a lawyer, and I was a trainer at the seminar, and I was working with him to get him to be a better lawyer, to be a better presenter in front of people. And by the time the class was coming to the end, where they were doing, they actually got up and now were being tested to get their certificate to be approved to teach basically hypnosis. It was a hypnosis trainer's training course, which we also, if people can come in and say, hey, look, I'm a lawyer, I'm a psychologist, I'm a doctor, I'm a politician, here's what I want to do with this. So what we'll do is we will say, okay, we're going to teach you the hypnosis skills to become a trainer of hypnosis. However, we're also going to be looking at you as a lawyer and saying, how can you better be a representative as a lawyer using hypnotic skills. So we integrate both of them. We're saying, okay, we're not just going to teach you, we're just going to teach you hypnosis. Whatever you do with it, buddy, is what you do with it. No. When I worked for John Overdurf and Julie Silverthorne and went there assisted with them, our deal was, how do we integrate both of them? How do we make the what they want? They want to be a lawyer that presents hypnotically, then that's what we'll do. We'll also make sure that he's able to present the hypnotic skills. However, we're going to include that with the law. And one of his deals was doubt, and he was talking about working with somebody that had been arrested for DWI, and I can't remember if he'd gotten into an accident or if it was his third, fourth DWI. His deal was to put doubt as a lawyer into the minds of the jurors. And when he got down to the last day and he did his presentation, I was blown away, not just by his presentation, because he really excelled at his presentation. I was blown away at the fact that here was a guy that was guilty of driving while drinking. However, he was able to take accurate maps of why the law was not able to prosecute this guy. It wasn't adequate of the representation of what happened in the situation. Was this guy guilty or not? However, what he added based on law, all this accurate information, and then was able to put doubt in my mind based on the law, not on the actuality of what happened. Now, if we take it to another court and we go to a court that's not a criminal court but a civil court, different laws apply to make adequate and accurate there. However, it blew me away. I had no idea really how lawyers work, because throughout the progression of this week, he was telling me how to put doubt in there and it made me feel good in one way, that if I was ever arrested for something, or ever arrested period, and it needed a lawyer to come in to help bring out the truth, especially if it was a wrongful arrest or a wrongful prosecution, that a guy like this could put doubt in there. However, at the same time, if somebody was a drunk driver and hit one of my kids in a car accident, and now we've got that same lawyer doing that, I think you get an idea of how accurate and adequate and how this can be really used. And if you think that it's just lawyers and doctors and psychiatrists that are learning this, forget it. I know every professional athlete, including your Tiger Woods, has somebody that is very proficient in NLP hypnosis skills. I know all the people in Hollywood that are doing commercial, Madison Avenue, that are doing commercials, that are doing TV shows. They write these shows for commercials. Basically, they want the show to be successful. They know exactly where to build up to a peak point, get you into an emotional state, and then switch to a commercial. So they can do a Pavlovian anchor. So when they get to the end of that commercial, or they get to the end of that point, they get you in a high state of emotion, and then here comes that. So let's say you get frustrated or you're angry about something, and then here comes a commercial for Excedrin PM, or you can't sleep at night and this person's all upset because they can't, and then here comes a commercial for Excedrin PM. Well, after enough repetition, or if you do it with enough intensity to really get in the unconscious mind, when you can't sleep at night, or maybe the commercial may cause you not to sleep at night, then what do you stake? The association is, maybe I ought to try that Excedrin PM and go down there. This is so amazing how this is being done to people. So I'm teaching it to people for many, many different reasons, and one of them is also consumer protection for the mind, which I actually is a course that somebody had on a tape set years ago, which I thought was just a great tape set. And consumer protection for the mind. How do you become aware of what is being done to you? Because a lot of times observation of it can stop it being done to you. Other times observation of it will not stop it being done to you. However, you'll know it, and if you start to tell other people, maybe somewhere down the line legislation could be formed to stop it from happening, especially if it's been used for nefarious purposes. So, all right. Now, we must avoid mistaking one for another, adequate versus accurate. What to expect from this book? Okay, life, remarked Kierkegaard, can only be understood backwards, but we must live it forwards. Every chapter of this book has been written with one dominant purpose, to show you the habits of thinking that will help you make adequate verbal maps. So basically, here's the sum up. There's a paragraph there which we didn't need to get into. Clear thinking simply means making adequate verbal maps. To be happy and successful, we must base our plans on maps that fit the territory. Only an adequate map will have the necessary predictability that will allow us to plan, to choose, to decide what is best for us to do. When you first meet the notion of verbal mapping, it will naturally seem strange and unfamiliar, but once you learn to use it, you will find it a fruitful approach to the problem of straight thinking. I'm going to read you one little bit of this. I'll probably, as I go through this book and continue to read it, I'm probably going to add little pieces of it in there. I won't read so much of it at one time. I just thought that was such a great description of map versus territory. The menu is not the meal. That I had to read it and also extrapolate and add some ideas of my own in there. Here's a Japanese proverb: one look is worth 100 reports. President Kalinin was telling a group in Moscow about the marvelous accomplishments of Russia under communism. In glowing terms, he described the new 20-story skyscrapers on Karl Marx Street in Kharkov. But Comrade Callan, spoke up one old man in the audience, I've lived in Kharkov for the last 50 years. At night, after supper, I walk down Karl Marx Street with my wife and children, and we've never seen the skyscrapers. That's the troubles with workers like you, Kalinin interrupted angrily. You waste your time walking the streets instead of reading the newspapers and finding out what is going on in your country. I love that one. I thought that was great. Here's another one I'm going to read you, and then I'm going to get to some notes that I have made and to close this podcast out for now. The limitations of maps. I visited the troops near Countenance on the 29th, wrote George Patton. George Patton was World War II general. There's a movie about him called Patton. And he found an armored division sitting on a road while its headquarters, secreted behind an old church, were deeply engrossed in the study of maps. I asked why they had not crossed the Seine, which is a river in France. They told me they were making a study of it at the moment, but could not find a place where it could be forded, which is broke through or going across. I asked what effort they had made to find such a place, and was informed that they were studying the maps to that end. I told them then I had just waded across it, and it was not over 2 feet deep, and that the only defense I knew about was one machine gun, which had fired very inaccurately at me. I repeated the Japanese proverb, one look is worth 100 reports, and asked them why in the hell they had not gone down the river personally. They learned the lesson, and from then on were very great divisions. As Patton pointed out, maps may be a poor substitute for actually surveying the territory for themselves. Patton did not criticize the map the division leader was using. Those maps were probably accurate and quite adequate as far as they went. Patton criticized his failure to supplement the map with his own observations. So there we have it. We've got maps in our head, and we want to go by the maps, and we want to kind of put our maps on reality and put our maps on the world. This is what it means. This is what you said. This is what you must have meant. And what happens a lot of times is that we don't go and observe the territories. Don't confuse me with the facts. This is what I'm thinking. So we put one thing on to another. I'm going to give you an example of what happened recently to me when I was out in California with a friend of mine and his girlfriend, as I now take a sip of this excellent water called Vermont Pure Natural Spring Water. Lovely. Very good water. So I was out in California, and this friend of mine wanted me to do some work with this girl, and I've known him for about 10 years, so I know his countenance, I know his personality, his attitudes pretty well. Great guy. Wouldn't hurt a fly. Very spiritual, very liberal in his belief systems. And he was telling me about this girl that he met, this lady that he met, and what was going on with the relationship, and would I do some work with her? She was really, really screwed up, but he loved her. She had a great heart, very spiritual girl. And, I know there's problems with communication, but it takes two to tango. And I've known this guy for a long time, and I'm thinking, okay, it takes two. We're going to find. But the more stories he told me, the more I'm going, jeepers creepers, man. Who is this girl? What did he get involved with? Who did he get involved with here? Anyways, what I did was, we got to the point where, she didn't want to work this day, and she didn't want to do any work this day. And I finally said, I'm not chasing her around. If she wants to do work, this is when I'm available, and this is when I'm not. I'm not going to get caught up in the idea of, and he goes, well, that's what she likes to do. She likes to take people's realities, and when you get near her reality, she's going to want to run your reality. And I said, fine. I said, I can go with that for a little bit. However, I know also how to find doorways out of her reality and find doorways out of her trying to encompass me within her reality. So we were getting ready to go to spend the day at these waterfalls up in Northern California and just do some swimming and observe the waterfalls. And he said something about bringing her, and I said, yeah, sure. If she wants to come, she can come. Well, she started calling him on the phone, and they started going back and forth, and it started to her, well, she needed to do this, and she wanted to do this, and could we do this, and could we do that? And it's like, okay, look, this is our day. Here's what's going on. We're willing to be flexible within the realm of coming to pick her up and then bringing her with us. However, this is what we're going to do today. And he found himself being caught up and saying, well, but maybe we should do this. And so he was starting to get caught up in her reality, and I said, that's fine. If you want to do something with her, I can drop you back off, and here's what I'm going to do today. So I had it set in my mind that this is what I was going to do today. I wanted to go here. They started getting into their little spats back and forth, and what I would do is I would pull over to the side of the road, and I heard her talking to him a little bit through the cell phone that he was talking on, and then what he was saying back to her, and I realized that this was just going to be a distraction, and she was trying her best to get us off track or to do what she wanted to do. However, I knew that we were going to be going to pick her up, and she wanted to come with us. So I started to head back towards, because I was driving and he was on the phone, head towards back where she was. I said, so we need to go pick her up. He goes, no, we're probably just going to go. She's not going to come. I said, I think she's going to come, but okay. So I said, how about I just pull over the side of the road and wait? So I pulled over the side of the road. They got into a big argument, and then I started to go again, and I started to head back towards her place. He goes, no, just head this way and we'll start going. I said, well, she's going to call you back, and we're going to end up going to pick her up. And I hate to keep driving further towards this place and make our trip longer to go back and pick her up. And he's like, no, we'll just go. Forget about her, and if I have to, I'll turn the phone off. And I was like, okay. So we started going up the road a little bit further towards the swimming hole, and sure enough, the phone rings. I immediately pull over the side of the road. It was a hot day, so I found some shade underneath some pine trees. And they started going back and forth and talking. And they really started getting into an argument. And one of the things they started to get into an argument about was the word slut. Now, apparently he had called her a slut. And I could hear what she was saying, and she was going off the wall about slut. How dare you call me a slut? And what if that's what you think of me? I'm not a slut, and da-da-da-da like this. And neither one of them were asking them what they meant by this word slut. Okay? So we think, okay, what is the definition of it? So he gets it again. They started yelling, screaming. She hangs up on him, and I said, look. He goes, that's it. We need to go. And I said, no, she's going to call back again. You wait and see. She'll call back again. In the meantime, let's talk a little bit about this definition in your map of the word slut. What does slut mean to you? Well, again, this guy has been married. He's been with one woman his whole life. 24 years they were married, and then he was with her before. It's the only woman he's ever had sex with, the only woman he's ever slept with. She's extremely Catholic, and the Catholic girl mentality, so he really never had an experience with great sex or open sex or freaky sex. And the last couple of relationships progressively were a little bit more open, a little bit more freaky, and he was really enjoying this new way of cohabitating with women. So I said, what's your definition of slut? And he says, well, it's somebody that confuses sex with love, and she keeps, we're talking about love here, and she keeps trying to bring sex into it. So here's a woman that was more sexual than the man. The man was absolutely loving it. However, this woman was more sexual with him and was using that sexual prowess that she had and kind of bringing him in with the sex. And he said she was confusing that with love and using the sex against him when he was working more and interested more in the love part of the relationship than the sexual part of the relationship. So to him, the word slut meant somebody that confused sex with love. And really, on a bigger level, okay, now he's talking about it on a personal level. He wasn't saying, you're this slut on a level of society. He was saying between him and her, she was a slut. And so his intentions were in a certain way, and they were actually for deepening the relationship with this woman, which most women would appreciate, to say, God, man, in that respect, I like his definition of the word slut. However, slut has different connotations that he really wasn't familiar with, and what I told him is that women. I said, okay, that's what you think. And his deal was, one of the things in NLP is the meaning of your communication is the response that you get. Well, his deal was, I don't care what she thinks. This is what I mean, and this is what I'm saying to her, and she ought to understand that. I said, well, let me tell you something. I grew up with sisters, and I had a lot of women around, and when you say the word slut to a woman, it doesn't have personal connotations. It does have personal connotations, but the primary connotation is not personal. It is social. There's another level of abstraction that it jumps to. It is a social level. It is a woman that goes around and sleeps. And again, this woman had admittedly to him been with like over 40 men in her lifetime, but she's 41 years old. So that's what, in her couple men a year within her active sexual lifetime, 20 years, 2 men a year. Whoop-de-doo, and some people say, wow, that's crazy. That's, I've been with 4 or 5 people in my lifetime. 40 is a lot. Some people it is, some people it's not. Again, what is your model of reality? And I said to them, the word slut means something totally different. It means a woman that just goes around and sleeps with any guy and just does it because she wants to, because she likes sex and doesn't have any interest in love. And I said, so yeah, part of your model is accurate in there. However, it is like to a guy calling him a rapist or calling a guy a child molester or something like that, something crazy. So and he's like, well, that's not how I meant it, and he's being defensive. And I said, look, here's the deal. What if you just took on her model, her subjective model, and assumed, and that model may not have been exactly what she was thinking. I think it was pretty close based on from what I heard. So I narrowed it down and got it as close as possible about what this word slut meant to her and how it felt to her and the meaning of it. I said, let me tell you, if that's how she interpreted it, would you feel bad about that? Absolutely, I'd feel bad about that, he says. And I said, well, what if you just took her model on and presume that that's how she took it and said, look, I understand now how you're taking this word slut, and I'm sorry because that is not how I meant it to be, and I didn't mean it to, to be that way towards you, blah, blah, blah. I had all that information there, and I said, then see what happens to this argument, see what happens to the day and everything, right? So she calls back just as we're getting done with the conversation, and they start talking, and he says, look, he goes, I got to say, he goes, Mark just went through and started to tell me about what women know is the meaning of the word slut. And he goes, that was not the meaning that I had. And I kind of like said, forget about your meaning. Just go with her meaning. And he says, based on what he told me, what the meaning is, that is not what I meant. That was not what I meant to call you. I didn't mean to say that, guys thought about you this way, women thought about you, that you had this. And I am really sorry. Would you please forgive me? And he goes into I just completely accepted her model. This girl was talking 100 miles an hour in all the previous conversations, dead silence on the other end of the line. And there was dead silence for a period of time, and then she said, okay, I accept it, I forgive you. And the whole mannerism changed. The whole meaning of the conversation changed. There wasn't a fight anymore. She said, okay, come pick me up, I want to go with you guys. And before we get onto the phone with her, I said, this is what'll happen if you'll do it in this way. And I says, do it for me as an experiment to get new data. not to prove whether you're right or wrong. Is it adequate or not? Is it useful or not? Is this what you want? Do you want to spend the day with her? Do you want us to spend the day with us and go and have a good time and let her do her things and we'll do our things and then, do some things together? Yeah, that's what I want to do. Okay, try this without thinking that your model is right or wrong. What you intended is right or wrong. There is no right or wrong in there. What is her subjective experience? What is your subjective experience? And then how do the two? So go by her model. And it shifted everything. And then when she came into the car, she started speaking to me in implied language, which a lot of women do. She goes, "Here's what I'm thinking. I don't like the way that he keeps thinking something's wrong with me, and he wants me to keep doing." She told me in no uncertain terms, basically, he's pushing too hard, because she got the fact that if I could tell him about the slut thing, number one, that built rapport, because she was afraid to work with me. She had some real issues with men. She had real issues. She was molested as a child, and she did not trust any therapist because nobody seemed to understand her. That immediately, when she got in the car, she starts telling me this stuff. So she has rapport, and she trusts me to be able to interpret back to him what she's saying is causing and triggering a lot of this disagreement and arguing, because she really likes the guy, really cares about him. However, her nervous system, her mass of conflicting impulses as a woman is being really stimulated and gone nuts, because he is putting this information into it. It's like putting a little firecracker or a bomb into somebody's subjective experience, and then or electrical short, putting they have house wiring, and you put in a high voltage line into their house, and it just caused the whole circuitry to go nuts. That's what semantics can do. Stimulus response. A lot of people don't have control of that, so you have to watch out. What is your map? What is your verbal map? How do you verbally explain that map to somebody else? And if you start to see reactions, you better start to get information to find out what caused that reaction, because chances are close to 100% your model of reality and her model of reality, your model of illusion in your head, her model of illusion in her head, are completely different. So words can't get us the model exactly. However, it can get us close enough. And then if we jump up one level of abstraction and get into process, how information is processed, what the real meanings of it were, what they thought it was, and then take that level, we're going to be much more adequate in our communication as human beings to each other, as therapists, as salespeople, and it's just going to make for a kinder, gentler world without having to force any rules or laws on people. You just do it because it's useful, because it doesn't screw. I mean, think about how upsetting it is to be able to try to get a message into somebody's mind of what you really intend, and you don't have a way of getting it in there. That's frustrating. What if you learned this NLP stuff and you learn how to do it and you get it in there in the way that that person needs to hear it and they get it? How much trouble have you just saved yourself? Why would you want to frustrate yourself by continuing down the road of having something that may be accurate in your mind, is not adequate, is not useful, and causes you pain along with the other person? So that's my little way of purpose of saying, how do we make this world a better place? We teach communication. We get to the point and to the level where we can really define and understand somebody. I remember one time listening to a tape, I think it was by Tom Waitley or Dennis Waitley, maybe it was, where they were talking about going into a sales transaction. Bringing this into the sales world, and they had these different vendors. They were sitting in a room, and the guy that was looking for a vendor to take care of his needs was starting to get frustrated, because all the vendors were coming in and presenting information that wasn't the kind of information that he wanted 100%. And when he asked them questions, they just kept going back to their script and to their model, and they weren't paying any attention to his frustration and his model of the world. And then one guy comes in and he starts going on it, and the guy goes, "Look, that's not," and the guy turned around and he goes, "Well, how are you thinking about this? What exactly are you thinking is the issue, and what do you really want to know from me?" And he told the other guys, because he was getting ready to cancel the project, he goes, "Hold on a minute." And he goes, "Tell me that again." He goes, "Yeah." He goes, "I'm interested. What is it that I'm not getting to you? What is it that you need to know?" And he told the guy, "You've got the job." Why did he have the job? Just because the guy attempted to understand him. and cared about what he was. He wasn't in his ego saying, no, this is what it is and this is it, and it's the other guy's fault if he doesn't get it. No, he put his ego behind him, and he asked a question to say, maybe I'm not getting this, maybe I'm not understanding this. What's your model? Let me into your model and tell me exactly what you're looking for, what you need. That enough was enough to give this guy to give the project to him, a whole project which was worth millions of dollars. So in your reality, how nice is it when somebody actually tries to find out? Let's say you're talking to somebody, and I know I'm going long on this one. That's fine. It's been a long time since I've done one, so I'm adding a little bit of value, a lot more value for the extended non-issuing of a podcast. So that if you're trying to get a point across and then somebody stops and they stop defending their point of view and say, wait a minute, are you trying to say this, this, and this? Do you mean this is this? So what you're saying is this? And that was one of the other things the guy did. It says, so what you're saying is this. And he repeated back to the guy what he was saying in a way that the guy understood it and that the guy knew that he was understanding it. When somebody says that to me, I don't know about you, but I feel totally different. I feel totally different, and I start to begin to trust the person, and I start to let them into my reality, into my subjective reality or real reality, more than I would have without that. So again, we've all got many, many different maps. Subjective maps. We've got objective maps. We have a hard enough time with the objective maps. Again, think about the 12 people in an accident all having different interpretations. That's an objective map. We already have enough of a trouble with the objective map. Think about the subjective map. All the other elements that we have that are unseen within that person's experience. And for somebody to be able to go in and start to map that territory and be interested enough in that person to map their territory, I'll tell you what, you'll get so far in life just by doing that simple thing. So again, with my friend, what happened was he had an experience that at the end of that really brought him to tears, because he had realized that it wasn't, his real intention was to, again, I brought it to another level of abstraction. His first intention was to be right and to get her to understand what he was saying. And I said, no, your real intention isn't your real intention about communicating with this girl, loving her. You say you want to love her. What if you could learn a new way of loving her? We bring up the level of communication and find out that if he was willing to give up his right and wrong and willing to approach her from her model of reality, how it completely shifted everything, the love and the energy she gave him back, the compassion, the change in her voice, the change in her countenance, everything that went with it. He had a massive learning experience from it. So what is your map? What is your reality? What is the usefulness of NLP in your life? How can it be useful to you? What I'd like you to do is continue to send me your letters, your comments, your suggestions. A lot of times you say, give me specific techniques. I'm giving you specific techniques. Specific techniques a lot of times go into the left brain, and you can get them and you can memorize them and you can do them properly. However, a lot of times they fall within the model of your old model of an inaction. Now, some of you are real good at taking it, saying, give me steps 1 through 10 and I'll go out there and apply it and take action with it. Most people aren't that good. Most people can't do that. So one of the ways you can do that is through hypnotics, through metaphors, through languaging, like I'm doing, and explaining it in a different way, teaching you in a different way, that it gets into your mind, it gets into the deep levels of your unconscious, and then the behavior happens as a surprise kind of to the conscious mind. And then it does happen that way, and you get new information, kind of like I did with my friend with that woman, and said, just go from her model, forget about, and he's trying to go, well, what about this, and what about, I said, forget about all that stuff. Do as I say one time. Is an experiment. If you don't like it, don't ever listen to him again. Try this one time. Approach it from her model of reality. And the data that came in completely transformed him. If he'd have gone from his left brain approach, he still would have been making excuses. Well, maybe it was this. Well, maybe it was that. Well, maybe it was the way he tried it didn't leave that option open. And now he had a big, wide gap opening to say, what else in my life can I apply this to? What else can you apply this to? Let and trust your unconscious mind. If you have to, listen to this several times. I've had one person said they've listened to each one of my sex hypnosis and NLP podcasts like 6 different times, and they're finding amazing things starting to happen and changes happen in their life. They don't understand how or why. The deal is that what is happening and how, and the information and the changes that are coming are so pleasant that they've given up on having to know why, and trusting it and letting it happen as a natural occurrence. And I hope you'll do the same with this podcast. If you want, you can always go and read books. You can listen to other podcast tapes, watch the videos, get all the left brain stuff you want. For this podcast, trust it. Sit back, listen, relax, without having to pressure yourself to say, I'm going to remember this, I'm going to remember that, trust your unconscious to remember. And when you do, in a certain way, as if a commercial, one time, and I don't know if I explained this in this podcast or another one, I was at a Walmart store, and my muffler was going in the car. On the way up there, all of a sudden the muffler went very quickly, and it was making all kinds of noise. And I had to pick up some things, some sundries at the Walmart store, and I'm walking back and through the aisles, and I catch myself. Now, I don't know how this happens either. This is something that we can talk about through dissociation or disassociating. I catch myself saying, as I'm walking down the aisles, I'm not going to pay a lot for this muffler. I'm just not going to pay a lot for this muffler. And I started laughing. I'm like, they got me. They got me. There's up in the Northeast and on the East Coast, there's Meineke Muffler. And they have all these different stars like George Foreman and different people. And they'll sit there and go, I'm not going to pay a lot for this muffler. I am not going to pay a lot for this muffler. And here I am at the perfect timing when my muffler goes. I'm repeating, I'm not going to pay a lot for this muffler. And if there's a Meineke muffler, I probably would have gone there just because, I mean, the fact that, they're good muffler company. Where I was, I ended up going somewhere else for it because there wasn't actually a Meineke in my hometown. There was one fairly close to me, about 30 miles away, and I went to a muffler place that I knew was in my hometown so they could repair it. However, the point is that I didn't put that commercial into my head. I didn't try to put that commercial into my head. They got it into my head. And then at the perfect timing, that commercial came out and Meineke Muffler was there. So they knew what they were doing on the installation process. Trust that I know what I'm doing on the installation process. Sit back, listen to it, be entertained by it like you would a television program. If you want to jot down notes, that's fine. For repetition, I recommend listening to the show several times. And what will happen is at that perfect time, when you need it, because how can you prepare for certain things in advance of things? So when that time comes, when you have a miscommunication with somebody that you love in your life, and your real intention is not to be right, your real intention is to love that person more, but you think I need to be right to love that person more, and you give up the rightness, or automatically comes up in your mind where you start to formulate the questions and say, you mean this is what you mean, and is this what you're trying to say to me, and go by their model and watch the relief on that person, because they can let the walls down, and when they let the walls down, they can forgive you or let you back into the reality, and now you can get back to love again. So hope you've enjoyed this podcast. Again, send me your suggestions, your comments, and testimonials. Let me know some more testimonials, and I'll be reading some in the future. And I'll probably have another podcast, I would say, within a week or so. But you know what? There's no promises here. It may be 2 weeks. It may be 2 days. Have a good one. Great talking to you. And please spread the word. Send the link to this podcast to other people you think might be interested. I think it'd be really neat to get this out to as many people as possible. So spread the word. Enjoy. Bye-bye.
This podcast is brought to you by The Secret Meditation. Learn to get in touch with the magical frequency, the frequency that will change your life now. Find The Secret Meditation at www.thesecretmeditation.com.